In my humble opinion, the composing section is the one that you have the best chance of getting a great mark in. This is definitely something that we should make the most of. And in this module, I'll show you exactly how to do it.
Everything you need to easily pass English ATAR. English ATAR Made Simple. Powered by Saints Coaching.
Welcome to Module 5. This is where you will learn how to conquer the composing section of an English ATAR exam. Before we get stuck in, I want to commend you on making it to the second last module of English ATAR Made Simple. If you've completed all the activities and all the lessons up to this point, I have no doubt in my mind that you are already performing better in English ATAR than you were before starting this course. I know this has been quite a journey, but I promise you, if you manage to keep up this momentum and finish the remaining lessons and activities in EAMS, you will get a great English ATAR mark. Just take it one lesson at a time, starting with this one. Here's what we're going to do in this lesson. Firstly, we will check in with the pair. You already know how I feel about this beautiful fruit. We will check in with the pair by revising the modules in EAMS, revising the objective of Stone 2, and of course, revising the objective of this module. After we've checked in with the pair, we'll highlight the fundamentals of the composing section. We'll underscore the significance of pack, not Pac-Man, Pac-Man. After we've done that, we'll outline the text types, compare the text types, then explain how to determine which form is your choice. Once we've done this, we will then be in a position to outline the structure of this module. You would have noticed this module is longer than the previous two, and this part of the lesson will explain why that is. We'll discuss option A and option B, then we'll discuss another side note about comparisons. I wonder what this could be. Then we'll start wrapping this lesson up by explaining why the composing section matters. From there, we'll outline a simple summary and get this party started. How you going, pair? It's been a while. You know the drill by this stage. This was you before starting EAMS. The moment you started the first lesson in EAMS was the moment you left Struggle City and hopped on to Stone 1. Once you got to Stone 1, Struggle City burned down, so you can't go back there. Then, when you started Module 2, you crept a bit towards the back end of Stone 1. From there, the moment you started the first lesson in Module 3 was the moment you jumped from Stone 1 to Stone 2. That meant you got one big step closer to pass English ATAR Island. When you started Module 4, you were in the middle of Stone 2. Stone 2 has 3 parts, and the rule responding module, Module 4, was the second. The moment you started this video was the moment you started the third and final part of Stone 2. This also meant you crept one step closer to pass English ATAR Island. You are now at the edge of Stone 2. Congratulations. Considering the next and final module is the shortest in the entire course, Module 5 is basically your last big hurdle towards pass English ATAR Island. Please don't forget that because you are so close. Here's a brief recap of the modules in EAMS. Remember, each stone consists of one or more modules. Stone 1, understand the concepts. This began with Module 1, change your mind, which is done and dusted. From there, we went to Module 2, also done and dusted. Now, the overarching objective of Stone 1 was for you to understand the mental skills and key concepts necessary for you to pass English ATAR. As you know, that was no small feat, but you've done it, so well done. Stone 2 is called Develop the Exam Strategy, and it began with Module 3 called Command Comprehending. You've polished this off already. We then moved to Module 4 called Rule Responding, and you've just finished that. Obviously, this is where we are now on the final part of Stone 2, Conquer Composing. Once you've finished this module, you will leap onto Stone 3, which is where we will practice the skills. You'll recall that Stone 3 only has one module, and it is the final module in English ATAR Made Simple. It's called Ace the Waste because that is what you will be able to do once you complete it. In other words, Module 6 brings together everything you've learned in English ATAR Made Simple and puts it to the test. We've recapped our overview of the PEAR, we've recapped recapped the modules in EAMS, now let's take a look at the objective of this stone. On stone 2, we will develop the strategies necessary to complete each section of an English ATAR exam, and we are 2/3 of the way there in meeting this objective. In order to fully achieve this objective though, we need to fulfill the objective of this module specifically. And that objective is to understand how to complete the composing section of the exam and then apply that understanding to some practice questions. That concludes our check-in with the PEAR. Now let's check out the fundamentals of the composing section. Starting with the significance of PAC. What is PAC? You might have heard of a CAP statement, not this sort of CAP, but the acronym CAP, or a statement of intent. CAP is an acronym for context, audience, and purpose. Therefore, a CAP statement involves stating what the context, audience, and purpose of your response to a composing section question is. I want to highlight at the outset that neither a CAP statement nor a statement of intent is considered part of your actual answer. Rather, it's considered part of your plan, which, as we know by this stage, is not marked. As you might have noticed, the subheading for this part of the lesson is the significance of PAC, not the significance of CAP. Moving forward, I'll refer to these three concepts of purpose, audience, and context as PAC and not CAP. I'm doing this primarily because PAC more accurately reflects how these three concepts relate to one another. Put differently, CAP has audience before purpose, but PAC has purpose before audience. This is because the purpose of a text determines its audience. For instance, let's say that I'm going to write a blog post that details how I use UpBank to automate my finances. One of the purposes of that post could be to explain a method I use on Up to automate my finances. That purpose then determines my audience, which would be young people from 15 to 30 years of age. Why exactly does the purpose of this blog post then determine its audience? Because UpBank is overwhelmingly more popular among people in their teens, 20s, and 30s than people in their 40s and higher. So in this case, figuring out what the purpose of my text was then narrowed down what my potential audience or audiences could be. If I'd done it the other way around, it wouldn't have been so smooth. I might have said my audience will be women in their 50s and above. Then once I got to the purpose stage, I'd realize I'm in a bit of a problem because my idea to write a blog post about UpBank doesn't really relate to my targeted audience. So it just makes more sense for me in this case to figure out what my purpose is before my audience. And I suggest you do the same. So that is why we are referring to those three concepts as PAC rather than CAP. Now, what is the significance of P, A, and C? As I said a moment ago, these three words stand for purpose, audience, and context. Hopefully you'll recall from module 2 that the purpose refers to the main function of a text. Audience refers to the group of readers that the text creator is addressing. Side note, the text creator in this case is you because you are the one who is creating the persuasive, imaginative, or interpretive text. Last but not least, we have context, and this refers to the cultural and situational environment in which a text is created. That is what PAC actually refers to, but let's answer this question of why PAC is significant in the composing section. Because the syllabus says so. The design brief part of the syllabus says, basically, you should know these three concepts very well. What this means is if you're feeling a bit hazy on what context, audience, and or purpose means, make sure you go and revisit the appropriate lessons in module 2. Another way to understand how critical PAC is through the following analogy. The purpose, audience, and context of your response are similar to the legs of a tripod that support a camera. Each leg is essential to support the camera. Similarly, focusing on each aspect of PAC is essential to create a great response in the composing section. The importance of PAC will become clearer as we move on to the next few lessons. For now, please just take my word for it and Skars's. You gotta know this stuff. Moving on to the text types. This module is longer than modules 3 and modules 4 because there are 3 different ways that you can approach the composing section. Those 3 ways are also mentioned in the design brief of the syllabus. Questions require the candidate to create a sustained, imaginative, interpretive, or persuasive text. Also, I'd like you to recall the following from the lesson on purpose and audience in module 2. The purpose of a text determines its genre. In this lesson, we also looked at the following screenshot. Basically, these 3 text types, persuasive, interpretive, and imaginative, they're all defined by their purpose. For imaginative texts, texts whose primary purpose is to entertain or provoke. Interpretive texts, texts whose primary purpose is to explain and interpret. Persuasive texts, texts whose primary purpose is to put forward a viewpoint. The purpose then defines the broad genre of form and structure that the text falls within. We've come across these 3 types of text quite a bit in the course already, and hopefully you've also noticed their relevance in the LFB. Anyway, just to be clear, the composing section requires you to create one of the following types of text. Firstly, you can create a persuasive text. Secondly, you can create an interpretive text. And thirdly, you can create an imaginative text. Moving forward, I will refer to these 3 types of text simply as text types, hence the title of this subsection. Speaking of subsections, let's move on to the next one, which is a comparison of the 3 text types. Firstly, let's check out how these text types differ based on their purposes. Some common purposes of persuasive text are as follows, similarly for imaginative texts, and thirdly for interpretive texts. This table is reproduced in the PDF study notes for the lesson. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these words now, and hopefully it already feels a bit familiar, and that is because we looked at this table in the lesson on purpose and audience in module 2. Here's a comparison of the text types focusing on the genres of form and structure they can fall within. For persuasive text, it's common to see an essay, an opinion piece, a persuasive speech, which is my personal favorite. For imaginative text, the common ones in English ATAR are novels, short stories, and occasionally plays. For interpretive text, we see autobiographies, biographies, feature articles, memoirs, news reports, etc. We saw a version of this slide in the lesson on genre. Turning to have a look at language features and how each text type uses varying language features. Persuasive text types use persuasive language features, imaginative text types use imaginative language features, and then here's the real kicker. Interpretive text types use a blend of both persuasive and imaginative text types. This slide is really what I was getting at earlier about how the different text types influence the structure of the LFB. If you've taken a look at some of the past WACE exam composing section questions, you might have noticed that some of them don't actually specify what text type you need to write in. Most of those questions use the phrase a form of your choice. When you see this phrase in a composing section question, I want you to remember the following. You can choose which text type to create whenever this phrase or a version of it appears in a comprehending section question. Here are some examples of this phrase from past WACE exam questions. In a form of your choice, create a distinctive voice to communicate an unexpected perspective with reference to the image below. In a form of your choice, create a text that explores a mood or idea from this image. Geborgenheit. 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 A German word that can be defined in English as the perfect combination of cozy, safe, warm, and secure. Compose a text in a form of your choice that embodies this concept. In the form of your choice, create a text that reveals a part of this person's history. Words mean more than what is set down on paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with deeper meaning. In a form of your choice, explore the ideas within the quote above. Create a text in a form of your voice that experiments with structural features to enhance its central idea. Those are some examples of the phrase in a form of your choice appearing in exam questions. Here are some examples of some versions of this phrase, a form of your choice. One version is the following. Respond to the image below by creating a text that employs stylistic features to challenge or surprise an audience. These words, creating a text, have the same meaning as a form of your choice in that those words mean you can choose to write persuasively, imaginatively, or interpretively. Another version of in a form of your choice is a particular genre. Create a text within a particular genre that explores an idea represented in this image. Another one, buy the ticket, take the ride. Compose a text in a genre of your choice that incorporates this quotation at a key point. Genre of form and structure is one type of genre. A form of your choice, a genre of form and structure of your choice. Compose 2 short texts inspired by the image below, where the second adapts the first into a different genre. 2 short texts does not specify which text type you should write in, so you get to choose. One more, compose a text in a genre of your choice that explores an idea suggested by the image. Elaborating on what we've already discussed. When a composing section question uses the phrase a form of your choice or a version thereof, and it doesn't explicitly state the word persuasive, interpretive, or imaginative, this question clearly says that we need to write an interpretive text. Or it doesn't imply that you need to choose a certain text type. Here's an example of a question implying you should choose a certain text type. 2 different narrative passages. A narrative is a type of imaginative text. Therefore, this question is implying we should write an imaginative text. So, when a question doesn't explicitly state one of these 3 text types or doesn't imply that we need to choose a certain text type, then that means you can choose which text type to create. Now we know what a form of your choice means. The next thing to work out is how to determine which form is your choice. Here's an easy answer for you. Focus on persuasive texts if you don't already have a preference. Why is that my recommendation? Out of each text type, persuasive texts are the most similar to an analytical essay. Why does that matter? Why does it matter that persuasive texts are so similar to analytical essays, like the ones you write in the responding section? In short, you've had plenty of practice writing analytical essays, and as we've already discussed, practice makes perfect. You typically get better at doing something the longer you do it. That is my overarching recommendation. I suggest that you focus on persuasive texts unless the following exception applies to you. Don't focus on persuasive text if you have consistently gotten good marks creating an imaginative or interpretive text. If you have consistently gotten good marks in an imaginative text or an interpretive text, then focus on the one that you're good at. Okay, before we take a look at an overview of this module's layout, a quick caution. Please do not challenge yourself by choosing a text type on exam day that you're not comfortable creating when there is a better alternative. Doing that is like a couple deciding to cook something they have never cooked before on My Kitchen Rules on the night they're hosting Pete and Manu for dinner. Why? Moving on to the structure of this module. You need to understand what we're about to go through in order to actually do the stuff in this module, otherwise none of it will make sense. I'd like you to think of Module 5 as containing multiple blocks. Block 1 is this lesson, Block 2 is the following bunch of lessons, Block 3 is the next bunch of lessons, Block 4 is the next bunch, and finally Block 5 is the final 2 lessons. Bearing that in mind, let's discuss these options, Option A and Option B. Each option represents a different way to complete this module and study for the composing section. Option A involves studying all 3 text types. Studying all 3 text types means, firstly, you will rank all 3 text types in order from your preferred to least preferred. For instance, let's say Elaine has the following text type preferences. Her first preference is persuasive texts, next preference is imaginative texts, and the third preference is interpretive texts. Once you have ranked your text types, you'll then watch every lesson in this module following the order of your text type preferences. So because Elaine's text type preferences were persuasive, imaginative, and interpretive, once Elaine finishes this lesson and its activities, she'll move on to the next block, which is about persuasive text. Her second block will be about imaginative text, and her third block will be about interpretive text, finishing with the same 2 final lessons in this module. Option A also means that you'll complete the activities for each lesson in accordance with your text type preferences. This means you'll answer 3 past WACE exam questions for the workbook activities that relate to your first preference, 2 past WACE exam questions for the activities that relate to your second preference, and 1 past WACE exam question for the activities that relate to your third preference. For example, by the end of this module, Elaine will have planned for and wrote a response to 3 persuasive composing section questions, planned for and wrote a response to 2 imaginative composing section questions, and finally planned for and wrote a response to 1 interpretive composing section question. All of that stuff is option A. This is option B. In short, it involves studying 2 text types. Studying 2 text types means that you will firstly rank all 3 text types in order from your preferred to your least preferred. Note that your third preference is simply the text type that you will not study. For example, let's say Hannah's text type preferences are as follows. First preference is imaginative texts, second preference is interpretive texts, and third preference is persuasive texts. These preferences mean that Hannah will not be studying persuasive texts. After step number 1, Hannah will then watch every lesson in this module except those related to her third preference, following the order of your text type preferences. This is the original structure of module 5 that we've already had a look at a few times by now. And this is how Hannah would approach module 5 in light of choosing option B and her text type preferences. We've got the first block, which is just this lesson. Then the second block will be Hannah's first preference, imaginative texts. The third block will be Hannah's second preference, interpretive text. We can see there is no block for persuasive text, and then Hannah will complete the final 2 lessons of this module. The third and final step for option B is completing the activities for each lesson in accordance with your text type preferences. This means that you'll answer 3 past WACE exam questions for the activities that relate to your first preference and 2 past WACE exam questions for the activities that relate to your second preference. Relating this to Hannah, by the end of this module, Hannah will have planned for and wrote a response to 3 imaginative composing section questions and 2 interpretive composing section questions. Before we move on, a quick warning about option B. Only choose it as a last resort. Why? Option A prepares you for every question in the composing section, giving you the freedom to answer the one you like the most, regardless of the text type it requires you to create. For example, Hannah, she has chosen option B and she's chosen not to study persuasive texts. Then fast forward a few months, Hannah is in her WACE exam and she sees a persuasive question that she would love to answer, but she realizes that she shouldn't because she didn't actually study them, and now she's at a loss for which question she should choose instead. That's one reason why I would advise against option B. Another one relates to the following. It precludes you from getting an English ATAR Made Simple course completion certificate. You want to get the certificate. It's like you go for a run and you forget to record it on Strava. Did the run really count? Same thing with AIMS. You complete AIMS, you want the certificate. You don't have the certificate. Did it really count? Sarcasm aside, that is why I would advise against choosing option B, but I'll let you assess the situation for yourself, and you're more than welcome to hit me up on the platform if you'd like any help in choosing the best one for you. Moving on to the next main part of this lesson, another side note about comparison questions. Just to make sure we are on the same page here, what are comparison questions? Comparison questions are questions in the comprehending section that require you to compose 2 texts in the same response. Here are some examples of some comparison questions in the composing section. Use the statement below to compose the openings of 2 different narrative passages, each employing the features of a specific genre. Inspired by this image, compose 2 brief interpretive texts that represent different perspectives. We've got another one. Compose the beginnings of 2 persuasive texts where the second adapts the first for a different audience. And one more. Compose 2 short texts inspired by the image below, where the second adapts the first into a different genre. My advice in relation to these questions. It's pretty similar to my advice regarding comparison questions in the comprehending section. It's another trap. Why is it another trap? Firstly, practice makes perfect. Think about all the composing sections you have done in English at school. How many of those questions required you to compose 2 texts? How many of them required you to compose 1 text? It's highly likely you've completed more composing sections regarding 1 text than 2. If this is the case, you have had much more practice with this. As we discussed in relation to the text types, more practice tends to mean better marks. Another reason why I advise against choosing a comparison question is it's easier to juggle 1 ball than 2. I already demonstrated this. Don't overcomplicate the composing section. Focus on creating one text really well rather than two poorly. There is an exception, and that is you can already juggle two balls proficiently. What this means is if you have consistently gotten good marks in the composing section for creating two texts in response to one question, and you believe you can replicate those marks moving forward, then go for it. Answer these sort of comparison questions in the composing section. Final part of this lesson is going to discuss why the composing section matters. The composing section involves creating a persuasive, imaginative, or interpretive text. Each type of text has a bunch of applications in a post-Year 12 world, but here are some of the main ones. Starting with persuasive texts. Let's say you're working for a small Perth-based business that sells cold-pressed juice. Your job is to help make and bottle the juice. Your boss's name is Adriana. You started working there the year after you graduated high school and aced English ATAR for $18 an hour. A year and a half passes, you're content with the work, but you really believe you should be getting paid more. Regardless of whether you send Adriana a text, an email, or you talk to her in person, your ultimate objective is to persuade Adriana that you deserve a pay rise. You might think persuasion is entirely unnecessary in this context because you and Adriana have a good working relationship. And you think she would just say yes if you asked, "Can I have a pay rise?" If that's the case, you've got an awesome boss and you should probably keep that job for a while. But in most instances, you're gonna have to try a little bit harder than that. By practicing persuasive writing and using rhetorical devices in English ATAR, you will be better equipped to ask Adriana for that pay rise using the right language. The overarching point here is as follows. Studying persuasive text will teach you how to use rhetorical devices in the real world to argue something that you believe in. That's persuasive text. Here's why interpretive texts matter. How many times have you gotten home from school and you've been asked, "How was your day?" I'm guessing an infinite number of times, and I'm also guessing that your response to that question is usually good, not bad. Alright, okay. Or a combination of the above. Whatever your response to that question is, it is your interpretation of your day. It is the meaning that you have made of it. I'm not saying these one-word responses are necessarily good or bad. However, when you move out of your family home and into a share house with some mates or an actual house with a partner, you will be asked that question almost every day. And if you want to have a good relationship with your mates or your partner, you should probably respond with more than one word. The point of this example is to highlight that studying interpretive text is designed to help you better communicate the things that you experience on a day-to-day basis. Finally, what is the point of imaginative texts? To put it simply, imaginative writing is about telling stories, and everybody loves a good story. I want you to think of that one mate in your group who has informally taken on the role as the storyteller of the group. Let's refer to that mate as Sam. Sam is the group storyteller because she always manages to get the group to laugh at her stories. My guess is that Sam has not spent too much time studying the art of storytelling. She's a natural. You might admire Sam's natural gift for storytelling, and you secretly wish that you had that gift too. The good news is it doesn't matter if you were born with the gift of storytelling or not. It's a skill like any other that can be developed. Of course, mine. You can develop your storytelling abilities by learning about the structure of a narrative in the relevant lesson on imaginative texts in this module. In summary, studying imaginative texts will teach you how to tell captivating stories. If you can relate to any of those examples, I highly encourage you to keep them in mind as you complete this module. Having an internal motivation to do something such as becoming a better storyteller is one of the most effective ways to do that thing well. And that is all the main content for this lesson. Here is a simple summary. Don't normally have a simple summary for these intro lessons, but this intro lesson directly covers how you should be completing this module. So this simple summary will simply summarize the information that you really need to know about in order to move forward. The fundamentals of the composing section, starting with the significance of PAC. The P in PAC refers to purpose, and purpose refers to the function of a text. The A refers refers to audience, which is the group of readers that the text creator, you, is addressing. Finally, C stands for context. Context is the cultural and situational environment in which a text is created. Hack is significant because the purpose, audience, and context of your response in the composing section are like the legs of a tripod that support a camera. Each leg is essential to support that camera. Then we discussed the text types. The text types are persuasive text, interpretive text, and imaginative texts. After that, we checked out that comparison table of the text types. You can see the fully reproduced version of that table in the PDF study notes. Then we moved on to talking about this phrase, a form of your choice. A form of your choice means you can choose which text type to create whenever that phrase appears in a composing section question. For example, in a form of your choice, create a distinctive voice to communicate an unexpected perspective with reference to the image below. Another example of this phrase, a form of your choice, in that you're allowed to choose which text type you create, is something like create a text within a particular genre. That phrase means the same thing. From there, we discussed how you can determine which form is your choice. The key takeaway here, focus on persuasive text if you don't already have a preference. The rationale behind that is that persuasive texts are the most similar to an analytical essay, and you've had lots of practice writing such essays, and practice makes perfect. Those are the fundamentals of the composing section. Then we turn to the structure of this module, starting with option A and option B. Option A involves studying all three text types, whereas option B involves studying two text types. Remember, only choose option B as a last resort. Second last section of this lesson, we discussed another side note about comparison questions. Comparison questions are questions that require you to compose two texts in the same response, and my advice is to avoid those questions for the following reasons. Firstly, you've probably had more practice composing one text than two, and secondly, creating one text is easier than creating two. Final main section of the lesson, we discussed why the composing section matters. This discussion was not strictly English ATAR content. I just wanted you to get a broader perspective for how this stuff that we're about to learn can actually be useful in the real world. I'm not going to recap that stuff on this simple summary, but you can see the info about that discussion in the PDF study notes. Anyway, that's it for this one. The PDF activities for this lesson are nice and easy. All they get you to do is just choose your text types and figure out if you're going to go for option A or option B. You should go for option A. All right, see ya in the next one. Until then, keep it simple.